Welcome to Javel Stories. Please support me by subscribing to my channel. This encourages me to create more interesting stories. Thank you so much as you do so. In a small picturesque village nestled along the shores of Lake Nyasha, life revolved around the rhythms of nature. The sun would rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, while fishermen pushed their wooden canoes into the shimmering waters, ready to provide for their families. Among these fishermen was Daniel, a man known for his unwavering optimism and tireless spirit. Daniel had fallen in love with Evelyn, a gentle woman whose laugh was like the sound of a cascading stream. Together, they were inseparable, a testament to love's enduring strength amidst life's struggles. Daniel and Evelyn's love story had begun 7 years ago. They were young then, full of dreams and hope, unbothered by the challenges of their modest lives. Daniel had been captivated by Evelyn's kindness, the way she helped her neighbors and cared for the children of the village. Evelyn, in turn, admired Daniel's perseverance and the way he always found joy even in the hardest of times. Their union was simple, celebrated with a small ceremony under the ancient baobab tree, where their vows were spoken in the presence of their closest friends and family. Life was not easy, but they found solace in each other. Daniel worked tirelessly as a fisherman, navigating the lake's temperamental waters to bring home a modest catch. Evelyn tended to their small farm, growing cassava, yams, and vegetables. Together, they dreamed of a brighter future. Over the years, they saved every coin they could spare, hoping to one day buy a larger canoe that would allow Daniel to bring in bigger catches. Their love grew stronger with each passing year. It was not just the romantic kind of love, but a partnership built on trust, sacrifice, and shared dreams. The villagers often looked to them as an example of what a marriage could be. Two people standing side by side, weathering life's storms together. Their laughter, echoing from their little hut on the hill, was a familiar melody to everyone in the village. This year, the village prepared for the Festival of Light, a cherished tradition marking the end of the rainy season. Lanterns would be lit, songs sung, and dances performed under the starlit sky. For Daniel and Evelyn, this year's festival held special significance. They had finally saved enough money to purchase a new canoe, a symbol of their hard work and shared determination. It was more than just a boat. It was the promise of a better life. As the festival approached, Daniel and Evelyn prepared with excitement. Evelyn sewed a new dress for the occasion, while Daniel carved small wooden charms to hang on their canoe for good luck. Their friends teased them about their enthusiasm, but Daniel only laughed. "This is the beginning of something new," he said, his eyes sparkling with hope. Little did they know, the storm clouds gathering on the horizon would soon change everything. Their love would be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined, and their story would become one that the village would tell for generations. A tale of love, sacrifice, and a bond that even death could not break. The night of the Festival of Light arrived with a buzz of excitement that rippled through the village. Children ran through the narrow paths, clutching lanterns that glowed softly in the dusk. Drummers began their rhythmic beats, calling the villagers to gather near the central clearing where the festivities would soon begin. The air was filled with the aroma of roasted corn, spiced meat, and fresh palm wine, blending with the chatter of excited voices. Evelyn wore her new dress, a vibrant piece of fabric in hues of green and gold, and Daniel couldn't take his eyes off her. She looked radiant under the soft glow of the lanterns that had been strung up around the village square. Hand in hand, they joined the festivities, their laughter and joy blending seamlessly with the lively atmosphere. For Daniel, moments like these reminded him of why he worked so hard, so Evelyn could smile like this every day. As the evening wore on, the two of them danced to the lively music. Daniel, despite being known for his fishing skills rather than his dancing abilities, managed to draw laughter from Evelyn with his exaggerated, playful moves. "You're terrible at this," she teased, her eyes sparkling with happiness. "As long as it makes you laugh, I'll keep trying," he replied, pulling her close. But even amidst the joy, the storm clouds on the horizon loomed ominously. The winds carried with them a chill that was uncharacteristic of the season. Some villagers began to notice, casting uneasy glances toward the sky. but the drums and singing drowned out their murmurs of concern. Later that night, as the festivities began to wind down, the first few raindrops fell, scattering the crowd. People hurried to gather their belongings and head home, while a few young men stayed behind to help put out the fires and secure the lanterns. Daniel and Evelyn walked hand in hand back to their little hut on the hill, the distant rumble of thunder accompanying them. As they settled into bed, the storm outside grew fiercer. Rain lashed against the thatched roof, and the wind howled like a restless spirit. Evelyn, who had always been uneasy during storms, nestled closer to Daniel. "It's just a passing storm," he whispered, his voice calm and reassuring. "It will be gone by morning." But morning brought no relief. The storm had grown into a full-blown tempest, with angry waves crashing against the shore and trees bending precariously under the weight of the wind. Evelyn begged Daniel to stay home. "The lake is too dangerous today. Please, Daniel, just this once." Daniel hesitated. He knew she was right, but he also knew they couldn't afford to miss a day of fishing, especially with their new canoe waiting to be used. "I'll be careful," he promised. "I've been fishing on this lake my whole life. I won't take any risks." Seeing her worry, he placed a hand on her cheek. "Come with me," he said gently. "If you're by my side, I'll feel safer." Evelyn agreed reluctantly, her heart heavy with unease. Together they prepared to face the storm, unaware of the tragedy that awaited them. The next morning, as the storm continued to rage, Daniel and Evelyn pushed their new canoe into the turbulent waters of Lake Nyasha. It was a beautiful craft, sturdy and well-made, a symbol of their hard work and shared dreams. But even the best canoe was no match for the fury of nature. The waves were relentless, slamming into the boat and sending sprays of icy water into the air. Evelyn clung to the sides, her knuckles white, while Daniel focused on steering them through the chaos. Despite the danger, he wore his usual reassuring smile, though his grip on the paddle betrayed his tension. "I told you we should have stayed home," Evelyn shouted over the roar of the wind. "I know," Daniel replied, his voice strained. "But we'll get through this, trust me." For a while, it seemed like they might. Daniel's skill and experience kept the canoe afloat, and Evelyn began to hope that they might actually make it back to shore in one piece. But just as they neared the calmer waters, a monstrous wave appeared out of nowhere, towering above them like a wall of liquid fury. "Hold on," Daniel shouted, but it was too late. The wave crashed over the canoe, flipping it over and tossing them into the freezing depths of the lake. The cold was shocking, stealing the breath from their lungs as they struggled to surface. Evelyn gasped for air, her arms flailing as she searched for something to hold on to. "Daniel," she screamed, panic overtaking her. "I'm here," he called, his voice hoarse. He reached for her, pulling her close. Together they clung to a large piece of driftwood, the only thing keeping them afloat. The storm raged on around them, the lake seeming to pull them further and further from the shore. The icy waters of Lake Nyasha cut through them like knives, and every moment felt like an eternity. Evelyn clung tightly to the driftwood, her body trembling as the cold seeped into her bones. Daniel held her as best as he could, his arms wrapped around her shoulders to shield her from the worst of the storm. The rain fell in sheets, and the waves tossed them about like leaves caught in a whirlwind. "Stay with me, Evelyn," Daniel said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. "We're going to get through this." Evelyn could see the fear in his eyes, though he tried to mask it. She nodded, her teeth chattering too much to speak. They had survived so much together, droughts, poor harvests, lean times when they had to make do with less. But this was unlike anything they had faced before. The lake, which had always provided for them, now seemed determined to claim them. As the hours dragged on, the storm showed no signs of abating. Evelyn's strength began to wane, her grip on the driftwood slipping. Daniel noticed and tightened his hold on her. "You have to stay strong," he said, his voice firm. "Think of the life we've dreamed of. Think of everything we've worked for." But Evelyn could barely keep her head above water. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, her body trembling uncontrollably. Daniel knew that time was running out, not for him, but for her. He looked at her pale face, her lips tinged blue from the cold, and made a decision that shattered his heart. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice soft now, almost tender. You're going to live. You have to." "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice weak but panicked. She could see the determination in his eyes, the way he held her gaze as though he were memorizing every detail of her face. "No, Daniel, we're going to survive together." Daniel shook his head, a sad smile playing on his lips. "You've always been stronger than me, Evelyn. You'll make it. I know you will." Before she could protest, he kissed her forehead, lingering for a moment as if trying to pour every ounce of his love into that single act. Then, with a final whisper of "I love you," he let go of the driftwood and slipped into the water. Evelyn screamed, her voice raw with anguish. She tried to reach for him, but the waves carried him away too quickly. "Daniel!" she cried, her tears mixing with the rain. "No, come back," but he was gone. The lake swallowed him whole, leaving only the faint ripples of his passing. Evelyn clung to the driftwood, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. The storm continued to rage around her, but the world felt eerily quiet, as though even the lake mourned his loss. Hours later, as the first light of dawn broke through the clouds, Evelyn was found by a group of fishermen who had ventured out to search for survivors. They pulled her from the water, her body weak and trembling, her eyes hollow and lifeless. She said nothing as they carried her back to the shore, her mind replaying the moment Daniel had let go. The news of Daniel's sacrifice spread through the village like wildfire. The people gathered around Evelyn's hut, their faces etched with sorrow and disbelief. They spoke in hushed tones of Daniel's bravery, of the love that had driven him to give his life for the woman he adored. But no words could bring him back, and no comfort could fill the void he had left behind. Evelyn sat in silence, her hands clutching a piece of the driftwood they had shared. She refused to eat, to sleep, to speak. The world had lost its color, its meaning. Without Daniel, life felt like an empty shell, a hollow echo of what it once was. The villagers, moved by her grief, decided to honor Daniel's memory. Beneath the ancient baobab tree where he and Evelyn had exchanged their vows, they built a small shrine adorned with flowers and tokens of love. Evelyn spent hours there each day, speaking to him as though he could hear her. She told him about the pain of living without him, about the dreams they would never see fulfilled. But even in her sorrow, she began to understand the depth of his sacrifice. Daniel had given her the gift of life, a chance to carry their love forward. Slowly, she found the strength to rebuild, to carry on. She took up his fishing nets and ventured onto the lake, feeling his presence with her in every ripple of the water. Though the pain never truly faded, Evelyn found a new purpose. She became a pillar of strength for the village, sharing her story with the younger generation. She told them of Daniel's love, of the courage it took to let go, and the beauty of a bond that even death could not sever. Every year on the anniversary of his sacrifice, Evelyn lit a lantern and placed it on the lake, watching as it drifted away into the horizon. It was her way of saying goodbye, of honoring the man who had given her everything. And as the lantern's light flickered in the distance, she felt a quiet peace, knowing that Daniel's love would guide her, always. The days after Daniel's sacrifice were a haze for Evelyn. She moved through them like a ghost, her body present but her spirit absent. The villagers visited her often, bringing food she barely touched and speaking words of comfort she barely heard. She sat by the window of their little hut, staring out at the lake that had stolen the man she loved. Each wave seemed like a cruel reminder of the moment he let go, the moment he disappeared into the depths. The shrine beneath the baobab tree became her sanctuary. Every morning she would walk there, clutching the piece of driftwood that had kept her afloat. It was the only tangible connection she had left to him. She would sit beneath the tree for hours, speaking to Daniel as though he was sitting beside her. Sometimes she laughed softly, remembering his silly dances during the festival. Other times she wept, her tears soaking into the earth. "Why did you leave me?" she whispered one day, her voice trembling. "You promised we'd face everything together. How am I supposed to do this alone?" The only response was the rustling of the tree's leaves in the wind, as if the baobab itself mourned with her. Despite her grief, Evelyn knew she couldn't remain lost forever. The canoe Daniel had worked so hard to buy still sat at the shore, unused since the storm. One morning she stood before it, her hands trembling as she traced its edges. It felt like a betrayal to step into it without him, but it also felt like a betrayal to let it rot unused. She took a deep breath, gathered the nets, and pushed the canoe into the water. The first time she ventured onto the lake alone, her heart pounded with fear. Memories of the storm flooded her mind, and she could almost hear Daniel's voice calling her name. But the lake, though vast and unfeeling, seemed calmer now, as though it understood her grief. Evelyn cast the nets into the water, her movements shaky but determined. It was the first step toward rebuilding her life. As the weeks turned into months, Evelyn grew stronger. Her time on the lake became a form of therapy, a way to feel close to Daniel. Each catch was a reminder of his teachings, each sunrise on the water, a reminder of the beauty he had always cherished. The villagers watched her with a mix of awe and sorrow, inspired by her resilience but heartbroken by her loss. Children in the village would gather around her in the evenings, listening intently as she told them stories of Daniel. "He was the bravest man I've ever known," she would say, her voice soft but steady. "He taught me that love isn't just about holding on. It's about letting go when it's the only way to save the one you love." Evelyn's strength became a beacon for others. Women who had lost their husbands, parents who had lost their children, and even those who had faced smaller losses all found comfort in her presence. She organized fishing lessons for the younger generation, ensuring that Daniel's legacy lived on in the skills he had passed down to her. The shrine beneath the baobab tree became a place of solace for the entire village, a reminder that love, even in its most tragic form, could be transformative. Yet for all her outward strength, the nights were the hardest. Alone in their hut, she would often reach out to the empty space beside her, longing for the warmth of Daniel's embrace. She kept his clothes neatly folded, his tools carefully arranged, unable to bring herself to pack them away. Sometimes she would dream of him, his smile as bright as the sun, his laughter echoing like music. She would wake from these dreams with tears streaming down her face, the ache of his absence as fresh as the day he left. On the first anniversary of Daniel's sacrifice, Evelyn prepared a lantern, just as the villagers did during the Festival of Light. She carried it to the lake at dusk, her steps slow and deliberate. The entire village followed her, a silent procession of people who had come to honor a man who had given everything for love. As the lantern floated away, its soft glow reflecting on the water, Evelyn spoke quietly, her words carried by the gentle breeze. "Thank you, Daniel, for everything, for your love, your sacrifice, your courage. I'll never stop loving you, and I'll carry you with me always." The villagers watched in silence, their hearts heavy yet full of admiration. Evelyn stood by the shore long after the lantern's light faded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Though her tears fell freely, there was a sense of peace in her expression, as though she had finally found a way to say goodbye. Years passed, but Evelyn never forgot Daniel. She lived her life in a way that honored his memory, finding joy in the small moments, teaching others to cherish what they had, and reminding them that love was the most powerful force of all. And every year, on the anniversary of his sacrifice, she placed a lantern on the lake, letting it drift into the distance as a symbol of a love that would never fade. In the hearts of the villagers, the story of Daniel and Evelyn became a legend, a tale of love so profound that it transcended even death. Beneath the baobab tree, where their journey had begun, their love remained eternal, etched in the very fabric of the village and the lives of all who knew them. As time went on, Evelyn became a symbol of resilience and devotion in the village. Her story was passed down through generations, told by mothers to their children, by elders around evening fires. The lake, once seen only as a source of sustenance, became a place of reverence. It was no longer just a vast body of water, but the keeper of a love so great, it had changed the hearts of everyone who knew it. Evelyn's life was not without its challenges. There were days when grief would resurface, gripping her chest like a vice. On those days, she would retreat to the baobab tree, sitting quietly with her memories of Daniel. The villagers respected her solitude, understanding that some wounds, no matter how much time passed, never truly healed. Yet Evelyn found solace in her work, in the simple acts of tending to her farm, teaching the village children, and navigating the waters of Lake Nyasha. The canoe Daniel had purchased became a cherished possession, cared for as though it were a living thing. Evelyn often spoke to it, addressing it as if it were an extension of Daniel himself. "You carried us through so much," she would whisper, her hand brushing against its polished wood. "And now you carry me, just as he would have wanted." One day, years after Daniel's death, Evelyn encountered a young boy at the edge of the lake. His small frame was bent under the weight of a fishing net far too large for him, and his expression was one of frustration. "Do you need help?" she asked gently, kneeling beside him. The boy looked up, his eyes brimming with tears. "I can't do it," he said, his voice trembling. "My father says I'll never be a fisherman like him." Evelyn smiled softly, her heart aching at the boy's words. She saw a glimmer of Daniel's determination in his eyes. "Come with me," she said, leading him to her canoe. "Let me show you what Daniel taught me." Over the next few weeks, Evelyn taught the boy everything she knew about fishing. She showed him how to cast the net, how to read the currents, and how to respect the lake that gave them life. The boy in turn began to thrive under her guidance. His confidence grew, and soon he was bringing home catches that made his family proud. The boy became one of many whose lives Evelyn touched. Her wisdom and kindness spread through the village, creating a ripple effect that reached far beyond what she could have imagined. Children grew up hearing her stories, learning about the power of love and sacrifice. They visited the baobab tree, laying flowers at its base and lighting candles in honor of Daniel's memory. As Evelyn grew older, her once strong frame began to weaken, and her visits to the lake became less frequent. The villagers who had long revered her as a mother figure took turns caring for her. Though her body grew frail, her spirit remained unbroken. She continued to tell her story, ensuring that Daniel's legacy would live on even after she was gone. One quiet evening, Evelyn sat beneath the baobab tree, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the village. Her hands, now wrinkled and weathered, held the same piece of driftwood she had clung to all those years ago. She closed her eyes, her mind drifting back to the sound of Daniel's laughter, the feel of his arms around her, the warmth of his love. "I'll see you soon," she whispered, a peaceful smile gracing her lips. That night, Evelyn passed away in her sleep, her face serene as though she had been reunited with Daniel in her dreams. The news spread quickly, and the entire village mourned the loss of a woman who had given them so much. They gathered beneath the baobab tree, lighting lanterns and placing them on the lake, their soft glow a tribute to a life well lived and a love never forgotten. Evelyn was buried beneath the baobab tree, beside the shrine dedicated to Daniel. The villagers carved their names into the bark of the tree, a lasting testament to their story. Together, they were finally at peace, their spirits forever entwined. In the years that followed, the tale of Daniel and Evelyn became a cherished part of the village's history. Travelers who passed through the area would hear of the couple whose love had defied even death, and many would visit the baobab tree to pay their respects. The lake, with its shimmering waters, seemed gentler now, as though it, too, carried their memory with care. And so, beneath the baobab tree and upon the waters of Lake Nyasha, the story of Daniel and Evelyn lived on, a timeless reminder of the power of love, sacrifice, and the unbreakable bonds that connect us all. Years passed, but the story of Daniel and Evelyn never faded from the hearts of the villagers. The baobab tree became a sacred place, visited not only by the locals but by travelers from distant lands who had heard whispers of their tale. The villagers, proud of the legacy left behind, ensured the shrine under the tree was always adorned with fresh flowers, candles, and small trinkets symbolizing love and sacrifice. The lake seemed to hold its own memory of the couple. Fishermen spoke of a peculiar calm that would sometimes settle over the water, especially during the anniversary of Daniel's death. On such days, the waves would be unusually gentle, and the reflection of the sky on the lake's surface appeared almost too perfect, as if the lake itself were mourning and celebrating the love it had witnessed. Among those most touched by Evelyn's story were the young children of the village. Over time, they grew into adults, carrying the lessons of her life with them. One such child was the boy Evelyn had taught to fish all those years ago. His name was Samuel, and he had grown into a fine young man, respected for his kindness and skill on the lake. Samuel often found himself returning to the baobab tree, seeking guidance in times of doubt. One day, as he sat beneath the tree, he noticed a young woman struggling to carry a bundle of fishing nets toward the shore. She reminded him of himself as a child, determined but weighed down by her struggles. He rose to help her, and as their paths crossed, a bond began to form. Her name was Grace, and like Samuel, she had been inspired by Evelyn's story. As their relationship blossomed, Samuel found himself recounting the tale of Daniel and Evelyn to Grace. "They showed us what love truly means," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "It's not just about happiness, it's about sacrifice, about putting someone else's life above your own." Grace listened, her heart touched by the depth of the story. She and Samuel decided to honor the legacy of Daniel and Evelyn by continuing the traditions they had started. Together, they taught the village children how to fish, how to respect the lake, and most importantly, how to love selflessly. On the anniversary of Evelyn's passing, Samuel and Grace organized a lantern ceremony at the lake. Villagers of all ages gathered, carrying lanterns they had crafted themselves. As the sun set and the sky turned a deep indigo, the villagers released their lanterns onto the water, watching as they drifted away, their soft glow illuminating the night. Samuel stood at the shore, his hand entwined with Grace's. "Do you think they're watching?" Grace asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know they are," Samuel replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Their love is still here in all of us. It always will be." The ceremony became an annual tradition, a celebration of not just Daniel and Evelyn, but of love itself. Over time, the baobab tree grew taller, its branches stretching toward the heavens as if trying to touch spirits of the two souls who had left such an indelible mark on the village. Generations came and went, but the story remained. Parents told their children about the fisherman who gave his life for his wife, about the woman who turned her grief into strength, and about the love that had transformed an entire village. The baobab tree, now ancient and majestic, stood as a silent witness to the passage of time, its roots entwined with the memories of Daniel and Evelyn. In the hearts of the villagers, the couple was never truly gone. Their love had become a part of the land, the lake, and the people who lived there. And so their story continued, carried on the winds, whispered by the waves, and written in the stars above Lake Nyasha, a timeless reminder that love, in its purest form, has the power to change the world. As the years rolled into decades, the baobab tree became a symbol of hope, love, and resilience, not just for the village, but for neighboring communities as well. Pilgrims from distant lands began to make the journey to Lake Nyasha to visit the sacred site. They brought with them their own stories of love and loss, leaving offerings beneath the tree and lighting candles in memory of Daniel and Evelyn. The village thrived in part due to the wisdom and traditions left behind by Evelyn. The younger generation carried forward her teachings, always mindful of the lessons of sacrifice and selflessness that she and Daniel embodied. Samuel and Grace, who had taken on the role of unofficial guardians of the baobab shrine, continued to weave the couple's legacy into the fabric of village life. One day, an elderly Samuel stood beneath the towering baobab tree, now more majestic than ever. He ran his fingers across the trunk, feeling the carvings of countless names and symbols etched into its bark by those who had visited over the years. Among them were his own initials, placed there decades ago when he first learned Evelyn's story. "It's hard to believe how much time has passed," he murmured, his voice filled with both wonder and melancholy. Grace, now his wife of many years, stood beside him. Her hand rested gently on his shoulder. "Time hasn't erased what they left behind," she said. "It's only made it stronger." The couple gazed out at Lake Nyasha, its surface shimmering in the golden light of the setting sun. The lake, though vast and untamable, had softened over the years, its waters seeming less restless, more serene. Fishermen often spoke of strange, calm days when they felt as though a quiet presence guided their boats, and many believed it was Daniel watching over them. The annual lantern ceremony had grown into a grand festival that attracted visitors from all over the region. This year it was even larger than before, with preparations underway for weeks. As twilight fell on the night of the ceremony, the villagers and their guests gathered by the lakeside, each carrying a lantern carefully crafted with symbols of love, unity, and remembrance. Samuel and Grace, though frail with age, led the procession. Together they stood at the water's edge, their lanterns glowing softly in their hands. "Tonight," Samuel began, his voice carrying over the crowd, "we honor not just Daniel and Evelyn, but the love they showed us, the kind of love that transcends fear, hardship, and even death. Let us carry their legacy forward in our own lives." With those words, the villagers released their lanterns into the lake. The sight was breathtaking, a sea of golden lights drifting across the dark water, their reflections creating an illusion of stars scattered across the lake's surface. Children watched in awe, their eyes wide with wonder, while the elders stood quietly, lost in their own memories. As the lanterns floated farther and farther away, Grace leaned into Samuel's side. "Do you ever wonder what Evelyn thought in her final moments?" she asked softly. Samuel nodded. "I think she felt peace," he replied. "She knew Daniel was waiting for her just as he always had. And now they're together again." The couple stayed by the shore long after the crowd had dispersed, watching until the last lantern disappeared into the horizon. The lake was calm, its gentle waves lapping at the shore as if in agreement with Samuel's words. Years later, when Samuel and Grace passed away, their children and grandchildren continued the traditions. The lantern ceremony became known as the Festival of Eternal Light, and the story of Daniel and Evelyn became a cornerstone of the village's identity. Each year, new generations gathered to hear the tale, their hearts moved by the enduring power of love. The baobab tree, now a towering giant, stood as a monument to the couple who had once carved their vows beneath its shade. Its roots stretched deep into the earth, its branches reaching toward the heavens, as though bridging the gap between the mortal world and the eternal. And so the story of Daniel and Evelyn lived on, carried by the winds, whispered by the waters, and etched into the hearts of all who heard it. Their love, forged in sacrifice and strengthened by resilience, became a beacon of hope for all who sought meaning in life's most profound struggles. Even as centuries passed and the world changed, the baobab tree and Lake Nyasha remained. Travelers from far and wide continued to visit, drawn by the timeless tale of a love so powerful it transcended death itself. In the quiet rustle of the tree's leaves and the gentle murmur of the lake's waves, one could still feel the presence of Daniel and Evelyn, their spirits entwined, their love eternal. We've come to the end of this story. Please subscribe to my channel to support me. Thank you.